Hey, welcome everybody to the Talent and Strategy Show on the Success is a Choice podcast network. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler, and we will be introducing our guests in just a few moments. But first, we got to hit you with the thought of the day. And this episode is brought to you by our friends over at Affinity Recruiting and Consulting. You can check out their services at affinitytoday.com. They can help you increase your bottom line, advance your mission. So our friends over at Affinity Recruiting and Consulting. So we want to get into our thought of the day. And essentially, let me pull this up here. There we go. If you can believe it, you can achieve it. So as we think about today's topic is fundraising. If you can believe it, you can achieve it. And so a lot of times we've got to have this vision. We've got to know what we want to go after, go get. And so if you can believe it, you can achieve it. And so we're going to be talking with some people there. If you're watching this on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook live, we appreciate it. Feel free, put in some comments, put in some questions. If you have questions about fundraising, we'd love to hear that. So go ahead and put those in the comment section or the chat section. So the first person I want to introduce is no stranger to you guys if you've watched this show or listened to this show before. Ruston Pierce. He is a former basketball coach, college athlete, headmaster, development director, superintendent, school administrator. He is now the president of consulting for Affinity Recruiting and Consulting. So Ruston Pierce, he's also our co-host. So Ruston, welcome back to the show.
Good morning.
And our other guest is Scott Garvis. Scott Garvis is a very well-known speaker. He's a well-known athletic director, former athletic director. He's been around a long time. He's written some books. He is an expert. He's on stages a lot, talking about fundraising, talking about what it means to be an athletic director, leadership. He is the man. He does a lot of stuff. So Scott Garvis, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, let's kind of get into this. I said on the outside, if you can believe it, you can achieve it. And so we're talking about achieving. We're talking about fundraising. Scott, I'll start with you. Why does fundraising even matter? What is this fundraising thing? Why does it matter? Kind of give us that 30,000 foot view of why, if someone's tuning into this for the first time, they're like, yeah, I've heard of fundraising. We do a church car wash, or we do a candy sale. But what is kind of fundraising in a nutshell?
I think for me, it's been the mechanism for any of the athletic departments I've worked for to provide our student athletes with, above and beyond. It's trying to find those opportunities, whether I always tell people we buy so many pizzas for kids at schools, but we don't spend much money on, development of leaders, development of student athlete leaders. So many times, the first time I actually kind of did a fundraising event, it was 1998 at MFL Marmac High School in Monona, Iowa. And I was like, man, I'd really like to have a speaker come in. And it was like, at that time it was like $500. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can afford that. And I just happened to be talking to the bank president. He goes, oh, we'll pay for that. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I can just start asking people like, hey, we want to do this for our kids. Would you be willing to support that? So at the end of the day, it's fulfilling needs for whoever you serve.
Yeah, I would just add on to that. It's scalable. So last week we talked about strategic planning and having a parallel financial strategic plan to go with your physical plan. And typically, anytime you do a strategic plan, there's going to be needs that are going to be surfaced. And you've got to start putting costs to them and saying, okay, what is this truly going to cost? And, you don't want to always put that burden on the masses around you, but there are people who are willing to come alongside and help. And so that's where fundraising ends up becoming part of the equation.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ruston, that you say that on the strategic planning and how important that is to your fundraising kind of journey.
Well, as you mentioned, Scott and Ruston, you mentioned there's a lot of aspects of fundraising, and there's a lot of reasons you would raise money for things, and you might be able to get people to donate some money for certain things over other things. And you mentioned just bringing in speakers. That might be something you fundraise for. Maybe it's to go to Hawaii or go to Florida or go to a special trip. Maybe it's for new uniforms or a second or a third set of uniforms or whatever. There's so many different things. Quickly, I want to bring in our fourth member of today's show. He's also no stranger to fundraising, no stranger to athletics. We have Tyler Whitcomb. Tyler is a former high school athletic director, basketball coach, principal. So just like you guys, he's done a lot at the educational level. So he's been involved in a lot of fundraisers. Currently, he's the director of customer engagement for Snap Mobile. You've probably heard of Snap Raise as a fundraising avenue or platform. So Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having me on, and nice to see you, Scott. Nice to see you, Ruston.
So we're just going to throw you right in the deep end, Tyler. You're just joining us. You were a principal, you were a basketball coach, you were an athletic director, and we all probably have some stories, but tell us maybe some things that you've seen that have been pretty creative or unique, or some cool ideas for fundraisers that maybe you've done or you've seen coaches or people do at the educational level.
Lately, I've been seeing a lot of dodgeball tournaments, a lot of, I saw one the other day. It was a big pickleball tournament, which I thought was a pretty unique idea. It ended up generating a lot of money. Back in the day, I always thought was interesting was mattress sales. I thought we did one at a big school, and I was amazed at how much money they brought in. But, it wasn't always the case. But those are some of the unique ideas that I've seen. Lately, I've seen a team do a little league, big little league baseball tournament that they generated some funds, and just being creative, just sitting down. I think a lot of times sitting down with whoever your stakeholders are and whatever fundraiser you're working on, and just finding a creative way that might suit your community, and just being able to figure out something that is creative and being able to go in and do those fundraisers. But yeah, I mean, I've seen some just crazy stuff over the years. As a basketball coach, I think I used every fundraiser for about 16 years. Yeah, so pretty interesting.
Yeah, Scott, you're a pretty creative guy. You're a pretty unique guy. Always lots of ideas. I'm sure that you've seen some stuff or done some stuff yourself that maybe is going above and beyond. Hey, will you buy a Snickers bar? Hey, will you buy these magazines from us?
Yeah, I mean, actually we've done a couple crazy ones. One in particular, we were actually doing a capital campaign for a baseball field while I was out in Seattle, Washington. We had Tommy Lasorda come and speak at one of our events, and we were able to generate about $400,000 at that event, which was absolutely insane. But we gave away a car one night at a basketball game. I worked with a local car dealership, and we sold raffle tickets. But if you can believe it or not, it was a lot easier than selling a candy bar. But we gave away a brand new car at one of our basketball games, and they had to be present to win. So our basketball game was absolutely packed. We couldn't even get any more people in the gym. So there's always different ways. And I always tell everybody, don't just do the normal things. Don't just go sell the candy bars. Think of some things that you can actually generate an event and create some excitement around that, so that you can, bring other people in if they feel like they're a part of it. Just like, Rustin kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. If you can get people connected to and develop relationships with your fundraising, mission and vision, man, you're gonna explode.
Well, I'm stereotyping because our audience doesn't know that you live in Iowa. Is this heaven? No, it's Iowa. But when you think of Iowa, you think of fields and pastures and farmland and things like that. And we once did for a college basketball team, we once did cow chip bingo.
Yes.
And maybe not everyone's familiar with that, but you get a section of land and you partition it off into different sections, and you get a cow. And you have a whole day of it. You get inflatables, you have all kinds of fun stuff, maybe concerts, there's picnics, just a whole fun day where you're doing other things to raise money. But the big event is, where is that cow going to lay its first cow chip? And, you sell those raffle tickets, $100 a plot, or $1,000 a plot or whatever it is. And certainly you don't have to do cow chips, you don't have to do cows, but you can do creative things like that. Ruston, anything that comes to mind creative that you've seen or you've done?
Yeah, I'm kind of where Scott and Tyler are. I'm more from the lens of I want to do things that are replicable and sustainable. Yeah. So, small event driven fundraising is typically always part of the equation. It just has to happen. There's little needs that don't fit into bigger picture fundraising that you just got to take care of. And so, when you're talking about those smaller items that just have to be done, my direction is always, what can we do that's unique to our community, that possibly meets the needs of the community, but that can be ours, and we can take that. It's unique to us. When the community talks about this event, they only talk about us. It's not something that everybody else has done. And even as goofy or silly as it needs to be, whatever you've got to do to get people's attention, do it. I will give a public service announcement, though. There is a fundraiser floating around right now, and as a former school administrator, it drives me insane. There is a company that is literally, for lack of a better term, soliciting phone numbers and email addresses in exchange for money, and schools are doing this, and it is, in my mind, it is so incredibly wrong. And so if you're a school and you're listening to this and you get approached by a company about selling emails and phone numbers, please tell them no. Your families do not want it.
Yeah. Just the selling off of information. Yeah. But you mentioned kind of long-term or bigger term planning in a way. You could almost combine things as well. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, where you could, and for instance, you could have this cow chip bingo, or you could have the selling of the cars like Scott mentioned, or maybe in our community, we do a big athletic auction, a big silent auction. Well, you could have where maybe half of the proceeds goes to the athletic department, or it goes to something sustainable every year, or it goes to that 5-year building project. And then each year you have a different cause that you're raising the money for. Or you could just, it doesn't always have to be this one event that we're doing. All the money goes to one place. Now you want to probably avoid, I would imagine, and you guys are the experts, but I imagine you'd want to avoid where you're splitting it off and taking something and putting it into 25 different things. But it doesn't have to be, man, we got this great idea, but people aren't going to get on board because it's only for X, or it's only for fill in the blank, which I think could be a problem. What are some pitfalls, or what are some things that you guys have seen? Ruston, you kind of let us off with selling of pure information. What are some pitfalls or things that you would warn against when you're looking at fundraising?
I'll go. I think being able to have safe and secure funds is huge. I think being able to limit the amount of cash that you're exchanging, like selling the discount cards and whatnot. And there's just too much cash that kids are handling. And I think if you can avoid that, I think it's huge. To me, it's and that's one of the things that I'm really sold on with. And again, I'm not trying to do an infomercial for Snap Mobile, but the thing that I love is just how safe and secure it is. We use a third-party processing company called Stripe, and all the funds go through there. And I think people they've got to ask. So if a fundraising company comes in and they're asking, basically, I think you should ask them is how the money is going to exchange. Who's handling the money, and just making sure that it's safe and secure, and kids are. Do you want them going door to door? Do you want them selling stuff? I mean, there's just things you got to take in consideration.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest pitfalls are you kind of talked about a little bit, Jamie, is just like the bake sale. I was at a booster club recently, like, hey, we're gonna do a bake sale at the basketball game. We're gonna, they want to raise $10,000. I think the days of doing bake sales for what I mean, I think it's important to tell people what stuff costs. And Tyler would probably completely agree as an athletic director. We did our athletic benefit dinner night, and I said, hey, a football helmet's $400. And then on top of it, every other year it's got to get reconditioned, which is $80. So by the time you get done with a football helmet, you've probably almost got about $1,000 into it. And people were blown away. And then we actually had some replica football helmets that we put for a silent auction. And they were going for like $1,500, $2,000, $2,700 for a, we kind of did alternate football helmets at our silent auction. And those went over huge. But people were amazed, like, oh, basketball's $80. They're like, oh, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And telling people where your budget comes from. Like, hey, in Iowa for us, and it's probably similar for Tyler when he was in Michigan, but all right. So, hey, parents, at our parent meeting, I'd say, here's where our budget comes from. We get money from gate receipts, and we get revenue from our corporate sponsors, our fundraising events. Our school pays for transportation, and some schools aren't even that lucky, and they pay for our coaches' salaries. Everything else is on the athletic department to cover those expenses. So I think people need to understand and realize where your money's coming from. And that's a pitfall because people don't get school funding, especially for athletics and activities. I think a lot of people's misconception is, oh, the school pays for that. No, they don't.
No. Yeah,
or they think that the school should pay for that. And so then they're like, principal, well, I'm not going to do that because the school should. And then you're like, well, you're right. The school should, but they don't. And so this is what we would like.
Only allow certain, like some states have state laws in place. No, you can't pay for that. It's got to come from, revenue generated from the athletic department.
Yeah, I love that, Scott. And I think too, is just being able to create that communication with your parents and your community and creating that understanding of what the school, what they fund, what the budget covers, what you're going to have to go out and, how are we going to sell banners? How are we going to do a golf outing? How are we going to do fundraisers to create the resources we need to leave our legacy, as an athletic director in an athletic program to succeed. So the kids have the best 4 years of their life. So they come back and they can invest in that program.
Yeah.
I think to add on to what Tyler just said, another pitfall that I see a lot of schools fall into is they don't have a global picture, and they allow their coaches to get real territorial. And they don't understand that when they get real territorial, they actually hurt giving. Because that parent that has a kid that plays football and baseball might have a greater investment in the athletic department at large than the $100 he gave to this booster club and the $100 he gave to this booster club. And so, one of the things that I always encourage people is really help your athletic director or help your principal, whoever you report to, by really planning well and showing them what your total needs are going to be, so that they can plan well and communicate that. And I'm a big fan of one booster club for the entire athletic department and not individual teams with their owns, because they just end up cannibalizing each other.
Yeah, that's a great point, Russ. That's a great point.
Yeah, and there's a difference too between booster clubs, and I know we can get into semantics, but a booster club and let's say a parent group. Mm-hmm. I'm not opposed to. I'm like you, Ruston. I don't like that the booster club for every single sport, if that booster club's main purpose is just to raise money. I'm fine with having the parent groups, coordinating food, coordinating different things to help out the team. But that money, you're right. That's an issue, especially at smaller schools where you have athletes playing multiple sports, and in those smaller communities where the same businesses are being hit up by the same people. And so you might miss out on a $5,000 donation to the athletic department because they've been hit up 4 times for $100.
Right.
And so you miss out on a whole lot of money. And you're absolutely right. We don't have that planning in place, and we don't bring everybody together. And sometimes it's not easy to do, especially if you take over an athletic department or you take over a program. This is the way it's always been done. So have you guys experienced that? Any of you of taking over a program or having to change up the way people think and trying to make fundraising a little bit more streamlined and better?
Absolutely, Jamie. I've taken over programs to where, this is how we've always done it. And you just have to tell, sit them all down, get all the stakeholders involved, whether it's a principal, superintendent, board members, booster club members, and just sit them down and just say, I get this is how you've done it in the past, but this is what I believe, and this is how I've been successful in the past, and I'd love to bring that to this program. Just give me a shot at it. Because, again, a little bit of my past is I was at Aviation Academy in Grand Rapids, and the biggest thing was creating some funds, creating some resources, and I used a different, unique approach, and I used, Snap Raise, and that's why I work for them now. And basically what I did is I just used Snap Raise after 3-4 years because I thought it was easy and efficient. I used it for all my programs. And I just communicated with the boosters is I want you guys to work on the golf outing. I want you guys to help me sell banners. And therefore we could just use Raise for all the programs. And I even talked to the programs about, 20% goes towards the athletic program. You get to keep 60, spend on whatever you want, create your legacy. Let's get alternative uniforms. Let's use the Oregon effect. Let's have the best looking uniforms and attract these kids that are from the area to come to our school. So they choose us. And I think being able to have a game plan and being able to sell is so important, and just involving every stakeholder that's involved is to me, it's the biggest difference. Because like you guys have the experience of when you do come into a program that's been around for a long time, this is how we did it. This is when we're successful doing it. So it's really hard to change it without sitting them all down and just communicating. And you also might find out there's a reason they did it, and maybe work with them and just say, you know what, we'll do some things my way, we'll do some things your way, and we'll find a common ground, and we'll do the best we can to create these resources so these kids have the best experience while they're there.
And Jamy, I had the opportunity to, as Ruston just talked about, having one booster club. I had the unique and honor of changing a school from every program having their own booster club to bringing it under one umbrella.
Everybody liked you.
Well, yeah, I was on a lot of people's hit list. But there was so many inequities, Jamy, and Tyler and Ruston. You can probably imagine, like, I'd go out to a girls' soccer practice, and all the girls are bringing their own balls, and I'm like, "Hey, where are you guys soccer? Oh, we don't have soccer balls." But then we have our hockey team getting new uniforms, new breezers, new gloves every year. Our football team's going out on the football field with jerseys that are 11 years old. And so the inequity that's at the end of the day. And then I tried to frame it for our parents. Like, number one, do you have a 501c3? No, they're putting into their bank account, to Tyler's point. And then they're like, and I go, hey, well, you need to be careful because that's going to end up being money that you're going to have to claim at the end of the year on your taxes. And they're like, oh, whatever. Well, sure enough, end of the season, I have some volleyball parents like, I had to pay. Well, that's why I told you to have a 501c3, and that's why let's have one booster club. That doesn't mean that we don't, like Jamy, you just talked about, having parent groups to do, like food and, help teams. But at the end of the day, having that overall booster club is going to help, fiscal responsibility. It's going to protect the money. There was so many times that before I got to this school that they had people embezzling money, paying car payments. The person actually got caught because they wrote a check from the booster club account to pay for their kids' lunch at school. That's how they got caught. So, I mean, there's so many things in having one that's beneficial that just makes sense. Title IX compliance and just those inequities are two really big ones, in my opinion.
It takes strong leadership, and it's amazing how coaches don't change. I was talking to a NCAA Division II athletic director about a month ago who's going through the transition. They're transitioning to Division I, and there's a massive strategic planning and fundraising component to that you have to submit to the NCAA. And the number one issue he was having in building that budget, he asked all of his coaches to create a 3 and 5 year plan of all their financial expenses so he could create that budget. And, we're talking about millions on millions of dollars that the NCAA expects are going to be spent. And he had coaches sending him, I need a new L screen, which is about $125. And he's going, no. I need to know when you're going to need a new stadium. like we're talking big numbers here. But in their minds, the coaches were just like, well, I'm going to need new practice gear next year. Or I'm going to need, they're talking pennies on the dollar, and he's having to educate them to think, no, I need the big picture. Like, when is your locker room going to fall apart and we're going to have to spend 50 grand on it? And it was just foreign to them. They couldn't think that way.
Well, that's a good point. That goes back to communication, which each of you have said. We have got to communicate with all stakeholders. So you're communicating with the people who have the money as to why you need the money. You're having to communicate with your kids and the parents and about, the process. And especially if you're trying to change that up. And Ruston said something earlier, very territorial. People are territorial. A lot of times coaches, parents, kids, whoever it is, they will feel like, hey, I've got to get mine, or there's no hope, so they're just going to store up or be greedy. And the more you communicate with them, the less territorial they will probably be, because they know there's hope. Hey, I'm not getting X, Y, or Z this year, but I know I'm going to get it next year, or I'm going to get it in 3 years, or, there's hope for them. Whereas a lot of times in most departments we find, or most programs, there's not that hope. We don't know when it's going to happen. And it might just be the squeaky wheel gets the grease type thing all the time. And that does nothing for the long-term culture and sustainability of your programs.
You know what I saw? There was a school in South Carolina, and I loved it, is on their athletic website, they had a wish list. And basically what they did is they, at the end of the season, you do your sit down and evaluation with your coaches, and you talk about like the small item things. But basically they had listed all the small items and the big ticket items that's going to cost some money for the whole athletic program and for the community to see it. And I loved that approach, just because now the community understands what you're going to be trying to raise the funds for. And you can tie a couple sports together. Like if it's in the gym, you can tie volleyball, basketball, and try to come up with those resources together. So I really like that, as you're communicating, is putting that information out to the community, just so they have that understanding.
Well, you guys had talked about booster clubs, and Scott, I was similar to you when I took over as an AD. I had a situation where, everyone's kind of running roughshod, and that's a wrong way of saying it, but you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, it might be accurate.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we did was we combined everything. There were still the booster clubs, but what we did was all the money had to come to us. Yeah. So they could still run their booster clubs, run their fundraisers. They had to get permission, but we pretty much rubber stamped everything, but they had to go through permission process so that they weren't blatantly stepping on toes. They had to go through a permission process. All the money came to us because we were the nonprofit, or we were the school. And then when they wanted money, that money was available to them. It wasn't something where it just went into this athletic slush fund and they never saw it again. But the other thing with that is we took the Athletic Booster Club, and what we did was we streamlined it. And as an athletic department, we requested things of the booster club, but we did that as a department. So the coaches would get together at a coaches meeting, and we would talk about needs. What are the biggest needs of our department? Not what's the biggest needs of Ruston's baseball program, or Scott's softball program, or Tyler's basketball program. It was, what do we need as a department? And so together we took that unified to the booster club and said, hey, you're tens of thousands of dollars. We'd like that to go to these 3 things this year that help the athletic department. But once again, communication.
Yeah.
Have you guys, let's stick with booster clubs just for a little bit longer with this, but have you seen with booster clubs where, have you seen things that you can offer our audience that are helpful for working with booster clubs, whether it's the athletic booster club or it's the soccer booster club? Other than communication, are there some things that you've seen that could be helpful to people? Because most people have multiple booster clubs in their athletic department.
Don't be the AD who's got to go make 15 booster clubs in one. That's one tip.
So I can actually give you, if you are the AD who has to do that, I can give you a fail safe that you can fall back on. and most people don't realize this, it's actually illegal in most states for a booster club to be formed at a school and set up their own 501c3. For accreditation reasons, you are not allowed to have a 501c3 within a 501c3. Right. So if you're an athletic director and you need to consolidate into one, and you've got a bunch of people who have created their own, you can actually fall back on your school's accreditation and say, it's not my rule, it's the government. It's actually illegal for you to have that. And you can pull it all back in really fast.
Yep.
I love that, Ruston. Yeah.
And you know what though, and Ruston, Tyler, you probably know this. Like it's for an AD, it seems like about every 6 or 7 years, the school wants nothing to do with any of that fundraising money. And then 6 or 7 years, you need to get all that back into the school. And then 7 years later, it's like, no, we don't want anything to do with it. So you're always struggling with that. You know, like you guys probably know this too. Every time you call this state, you know, and ask them, hey, can we use this money with state, you know, appropriated funds? Well, maybe. You know, so it's about as clear as mud.
But that's why it's so important. If you're an AD or even a coach listening to this, it's so important to talk to somebody higher up, talk to somebody higher on that organizational flow chart, and make sure that what you're doing, one, makes sense. It's wise, but two, it's legal. It's within the guidelines of your school, your state, you know, local municipal laws, whatever that is. Make sure. I've seen a situation in Indiana, and this certainly is an exception, but you will get the point of it. And it might be something you can examine where you're at and what you're doing. But there was a situation in the state of Indiana where a school was doing a 50-50 at a basketball game. And a lot of schools do 50-50s. You know, you win like $100, $150, couple $100. All right. We've all been there. Well, a parent got upset because her kid wasn't playing enough. The AD didn't work with that parent to resolve the kid playing time issue. And so the parent turned the school into the state for running an unlawful gambling activity. And that school got in trouble because technically, and depending where you are at, what state, what municipality you're at, even a $100 50-50 raffle is still gambling, and you need a gambling license. So that's something that you wouldn't even think of. Wow, I would get turned in by a parent. But you never know, and we know things can happen. So make sure you got your I's dotted, your T's crossed. So if you're running concession stands, make sure you have the licenses or the permission or all the things that you need to run that concession stand.
I want to know, Jamie, did that kid get more playing time or not?
It was at a different school. It was not at our school. But almost, you're right.
He got a 1-year free transfer.
It was amazing. His grandparent won the raffle the next night. It was how that happened. No,
well,
not
at our school. On that.
Yeah, not at our school. But yeah, just looking at things and making sure, hey, are we on the up and up with this? You know, and how does this look? And, you know, there's so many, everything is either a great example or a cautionary tale. And so you can look at things from other schools or glean something, or, you know, I mentioned cow chip bingo earlier. You don't have to do cow chip bingo, but maybe you can take that creativity and do something else with it. We've talked about strategic planning a lot on the last show. Ruston's mentioned capital campaigns. We've talked about development. We'll start with Ruston on this, but what is kind of the difference between development, capital campaigns, large fundraisers, small fundraisers? So kind of take us through kind of the definitions of these things so that we can be more aware when we're throwing out these terms, but also what might work for our department, our team, what road and path should we be going down?
Yeah. So typically you're not going to do a capital campaign unless you've done a strategic plan first, like we talked about last week. Because that plan is going to show you what all of your needs are going to be over the timeline of that plan. And then as you get dollar amounts attached to the different needs, obviously that's going to accumulate, and you're going to end up with a large number that's going to have to be acquired somehow. It's probably not going to be in the operating budget. And so that's above and beyond capital that's going to have to be raised. Typically, the difference between fundraising and development, fundraising typically is a little more short term. It's going to be a quick hit. We have these small needs over here. It accumulates to $25,000, $30,000. So we need to do an event and come up with these funds. Whereas development is more one-on-one relationship over time, trying to cultivate your larger gifts. If you're at a school that has a donor management system, that's ideal because you can process those larger gifts through that. If you're at a school that does not have a donor management system, groups like SnapRaise can be a great option because your larger gift people are not going to want to just cut a check. They're not going to want to send money to the school or to a principal. They're going to want to deposit it directly into somewhere they view as secure. Their groups like SnapRaise are going to be a great option for your larger givers. But what you're really trying to achieve is you're trying to achieve a relationship where that person feels invested in what you're doing as an organization or as an athletic department, and they're wanting to continually give long term to the greater mission of what's happening. A lot of times that can get a little conflicted. People can start designating and saying, I want to give to this one project. And that's not wrong per se, but it will hurt your overall giving. You really want your generosity to be undesignated, and you want that development to be undesignated, whereas fundraising is typically more designated.
So you're building, a lot of times we need to be building relationships. And how can we essentially dig our well before we're thirsty? How can we fix our roof before it's rains, essentially? What can we be doing now? Let's say we whether we're going to do a capital campaign or we just want to hit up that local business for $100, or we're going to do that bake sale, I think we're all agreed that the nickel and diming type fundraiser isn't the best, but no matter whether we're doing a big fundraiser, a capital campaign, or a small fundraiser, how can we better build relationships with the people we are going to be asking for money from so that they don't only hear from us when we have our hand out?
And I think Ruston made a really good point. It's developing those relationships that's really, really important. And I think, no matter what that looks like. So as an athletic director, I think it's important that you go out and speak to your civic organizations. You're going out and speaking to your chamber. You're going out and speaking to your Rotary. You need to tell your story. That is so important. You need to tell the needs. You need to tell about the great success stories of this kid, came maybe from a bad home, but then had the opportunity to play a sport and maybe to get a college scholarship. But man, he stayed in school because he was out for this sport. And now he's going to, Cornell University. You need to go out and just tell those stories. And Ruston spoke to this too, which I think is really important for us as high school athletic directors or any athletic directors. Developing that database is so important. And I know that there's companies out there that will help you. When I was in Newton, we actually, developed our alumni weekend, alumni association, and we worked with a company out of Texas, and they went and found all of our alumni for us. So that was a great way for us to not do the nickel and diming, but to have a strategic plan that, hey, we need these, big ticket items over the next 10 years. And we're going to go to our alumni. I don't think we do a good enough job, especially at the high school level, of really collecting that data and then using that data to reach out. Because we had tons of alumni that were like, oh yeah, we'd love to, donate to, the football stadium project. And hey, by the way, we've got a group of, 20 of us from the class of 1947, and we want to pay for one of the press boxes. He goes, but by the way, could you name it after our football coach from 1947? Those are the kind of things that you do when you build those relationships, build that database, and have the opportunities to go out and share your mission and vision of your development strategies and then also your fundraising strategies.
Yeah. I love that, Scott. And a lot of people don't know. So everyone knows this is SnapRaise, and we've raised $600 million since 2014, and great fundraising company, but also now we're Snap Mobile, and we have products like Insights and the store, and we do early access where we can grant funds, prior to their fundraising. I mean, we're doing a lot, but the thing I love with Insights is an athletic director can really look at who's donated money. You can reach out to them as an athletic director. You can touch base with them periodically. You can send them, just quick emails. But the thing I love about it is then you also have like a legacy, so you can reach out to your alumni and you can put together a game plan. So, and again, not that I'm trying to plug my company, but those little things that you can do of just being able to really reach out to your donors and to your sponsors and building those relationships is everything, because you're going to keep coming back to them and they're going to want to be part of what you're building, and that's what we're really trying to sell to them, and as we're developing that relationship.
Yeah, Jamy, you asked how you build relationships. What Tyler just said is a big piece of that, and it's the piece a lot of people miss. It's when you have a donor management system or whatever you're using to track your donors, the point of the donor management system is not to reconcile gifts. It's to keep track of how many times you've made contact with them. And so, if you don't have a system, Microsoft Excel works just fine. Yep. Going in and plugging in. I met with Tyler, I've got my Tyler Whitcomb's page and I list every time I talk to him in any way. And that helps me maintain that relationship and pay attention to, I haven't talked to Tyler in a month and a half. I probably need to shoot him an email, or I need to make a phone call. Those simple processes are how you build relationships, because every administrator has a million things to do. You're not going to remember every conversation you had. You're not going to remember every email. You have to be diligent to sit down and map those things out.
Well, Tyler, you had mentioned, and you've been a high school administrator, you've been a coach, you've done other fundraisers. You now work with Snap Raise, but you work for them because you did Snap Raise when you were working at the educational level. What led you, like, you were doing the bake sales, you were doing all these things, let's say, and then you hear about Snap Raise. Tell us, give us like a 30,000 foot view of what Snap Raise is, because we've mentioned it a few times. It's a great program. You obviously did it yourself before you even started working for it. So give us kind of a 30,000 foot view of what Snap Raise does for an athletic department or a team.
Sure. I'd love to. I first started off as a basketball coach. I think I was in my 11th year. I've used every fundraiser imaginable. I came in as an athletic director at Aviation Academy, and all of a sudden I just stumbled upon one of the reps, and he was working with our robotics team. And I was just blown away that he raised $4,000 like fast, and it was easy and efficient. And I was, all right, I'll try it for my basketball program. Same results. And I just love the fact that kids weren't going door to door. I love the fact that the money, again, we weren't exchanging money, because prior to that, I had a problem with my soccer coach when we did the discount cards, and he dropped me off a bunch of cash, and I couldn't even, I was just looking at him, and we had to have a sit down, So I just loved what Snap Raise did. So, and I influenced it for the next couple of years. For every time I met with a coach, you guys should just think about using, because I always made them do one fundraiser. Don't do 10. Because then people just get tired of it, and less effort. So I just want you to do one fundraiser, do a really good job at it. And I didn't push Snap Raise or anything at that time. And then in my third year, I just thought, I'm going to create a budget and make everyone use Snap Raise, try it for 2 years, let them spend their 60%. We talked about brand awareness, creating a legacy. You're the Mark Cuban of your own program. And then I would take that 20%. I would take the ticket sales, take the golf outing, take the banners. And then there is where I could really develop the big ticket items. Like I could sit there and sell to the community as the athletic or this basketball team bought brand new jerseys, but for the overall athletic program, we have this much in our account and we want to paint the gym a different color. So anyways, fast forward, I loved where Snap was going. And I had, I was a principal last year. I spent 2 months at a new school as an AD, and they asked me to be principal, and probably one of the worst mistakes I ever made. I was probably tough. I don't know how principals do it. I really don't. But it was a learning experience. And then Snap came up with a job that was, when I was talking to him, as for years, everyone knew him as this fundraising company. Again, we talked about raising over $500,000 since 2014. But what I liked is they were getting the pain point. They were building these relationships with coaches, athletic directors, And then they're really leaning into the athletic director and finding ways to build relationships and find their pain points. And what I loved is they're developing, now it's transformed into Snap Mobile, and we have all these brand products that we're launching that I love, and I love that I'm a part of it, and I love that I can work with athletic directors and helping them be successful. And in a lot of my success, I'm not plugging SnapRaise. I love SnapRaise. I love Snap Mobile working for them, but I also love what they did for me as an athletic director. I took over a program that really was struggling. And I mean, we're the doormat of the league. I mean, there's 11 teams in our conference. We lost. I mean, prior to coming in there, I don't think we finished out of the bottom 3 in any sport. And so what I did is I came in there, and it was a competitive area, the Grand Rapids area, where it's a school of choice, so people can come there. And what we did is we just really did a good job of raising money, using the Oregon effect, having Jordan brand uniforms, getting good coaches, having fun, creating experience for kids like team bonding trips. And by being able to do that, we were really able to attract the student athlete that we were looking for in that area. And again, student first, but they kept the mission. And then fast forward it 7 years, right before I left, we won 7 out of 11 conference championships. The team GPA was still right around a 4.0, which is crazy, but it was a really one of those gifted kind of schools. And that's why they really struggled in sports in the beginning, because they weren't getting the student athlete, they were just getting the student. And then we started really attracting. So anyways, we had a lot of success, and I took that same concept that I learned along the way, and I kept bringing it on to different schools and using SnapRaise along the way. And by being able to do that, it led me into a job with SnapRaise. I'm just ecstatic. I just love the direction that they're going, and I love how they're pumping resources into athletic directors and helping build and teaching athletic directors to build a legacy, at their athletic program for their community. And again, I haven't, I didn't want it to be a big infomercial, but with Snap Mobile, again, we have early access where we're granting out funds prior to your fundraising campaign, to where, like, if you're going to a team camp, or let's say you need a shooting machine. I was at a coaching clinic, and the shooting machine did a demonstration, and they needed, a couple coaches were like, well, we don't have the money. I'd like to get it this year. So we talked about getting early access, helping them fund it right now. But we have a store that's 365. So you're not the middleman. It gets shipped directly to the customer. And again, it's just learning the pain points of athletic directors, things that they don't like, and we're just trying to find solutions for them. Insights, that has all the information that you need. I mean, basically, I was using it, just printing it up, and then I'd go to a budget meeting, and it'd have all the information that you need. It tracks everything in your campaigns, what program, who's donating, so you can keep it going for the alumni. I mean, it's got everything, and we don't share that information. It's just our information for that school to use. And Manage is a scheduling software. We purchased 8-18. That's really big in Illinois and in the Midwest. And it's one of those things where we're just, every day we're trying to pick the brains of athletic directors, and we're trying to get a single sign-on. So, like, as an AD, Scott, you look at a screen, you have 50 screens open, you have all these tabs open. You're going from one thing, from Arbiter to your website and all this things. So what we're trying to do is create one single sign-on, to where an athletic director can just go in there and he can handle his daily activities with that one sign-on. So
you've mentioned.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So you mentioned the branding. You mentioned Jordan brand. You mentioned the Oregon effect, and you talked about, like, what Snap is doing with trying to brand themselves and different things. Scott, I know you've done a lot with branding and kind of schools now, and we see it with NILs to a degree with kids, but schools, everybody, I think we would agree that you have to have a really good brand. And so how are schools, or why is it important even for schools to have a certain brand, to own their brand? What have you seen in this area of schools being successful in the strategy of branding in terms of fundraising too?
The number one thing I think, and Tyler and Ruston with both, your brand has value. Yes, you're a high school. Your brand is very valuable. So do not, we have ADs all over the country, I think, that undervalue their brand. Yep. And so if you look at some of the statistics, like nearly 80% of your fans, knowing that a company or brand is a sponsor of your local high school, they are like 80% more likely to purchase a good or service from that business. That's crazy. That's crazy brand awareness. That's crazy customer loyalty. That blows, the NASCAR, which is kind of the golden nugget, out of the water. And as high school athletic directors, we need to realize that nearly 70% of your fans, if they know that a company or brand is a sponsor of your local high school, they will actually be like, I'll have a higher brand awareness of them because they are sponsoring, and I know that company because they help support, my son or daughter. That creates a connection. So we talk about developing those relationships. Well, when a brand partners with a high school, that gives that relationship. That brings, like, they have an affinity for that program. And I've seen a ton of that in Iowa. I've been working with Bound, and we're basically giving schools the opportunity to own and monetize their brand, something that drives me absolutely crazy. And Tyler would agree with this. We pay for products. We pay for all these products, and then they own our digital assets. It completely infuriates me because we got all these companies making money exploiting in these high schools, which is a multi-billion dollar industry, youth sports in general. And now, like with Bound, I've been able to help like a small rural high school. I just read something on Facebook the other day. Well, I'm in a small rural school. We can't raise money. It's tough for us. And Tyler would completely agree. And SnapRaise has, solutions for them. But with Bound, I've had like schools that have like 500 kids raise $20,000 with their digital assets. I've had schools raise $100,000 and really just put a simple plan in place that I've used throughout my years as an athletic director to help make it simple for athletic directors so they can go out and utilize that digital platform and Bound to make money for their programs and not have to do the selling or be a salesperson or have your kids having to go door to door, just like Tyler talked about with the SnapRaise platform.
We're going to wrap up the show with kind of our quote of the day, kind of as a wrap up, and then we'll bring it back to our three guests to give kind of their parting shots about fundraising, pitfalls, things that they should remember, whatever they want the audience to remember from the show. But if you remember at the start, we opened it, if you can believe it, you can achieve it. Well, kind of piggybacking on that with our quote of the day, it's from Edmund Burke. He says, nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could do only a little. Now, we talk about big things. You want to think big, certainly, but oftentimes there's things we let what we can't do get in and interfere with what we can do. All of us, there's things that we can do. And sometimes we say, well, we can only do a little bit. And yes, we've talked about the nickel and diming of fundraisers. That can be a bad thing. But we also want to make sure that we don't let what we can't do interfere with what we can do. And we want to make sure we're doing something. Now, doing something is better than nothing. But once you're doing something, hey, can you spin it into, can we do it better? And so we're going to start with Tyler. We'll go Tyler, Scott, and then Ruston can finish it up about parting nuggets, parting thoughts about fundraising.
Parting nuggets would be, for me, is an athletic, wearing the athletic director hat, is just, again, everything we touched about during this webinar is amazing. Like, I thought Ruston, Scott, Jamy, all of us, just great ideas. And I just love the fact that we talk about communicating. So I think the biggest thing is finding a way to communicate with everybody that's involved, finding out, for instance, like if you're an athletic director, new athletic director, first thing you should do is take a tour of the building, jot down all the little things that you're going to have to replace or find ways to fix, and new dream items of painting the gym, or I want to turf the football field, and just jot down everything, little things of that we're going to have to take care of right away, big ticket items that we want to be able to make a big splash in our community. How can we fundraise to get those things? How can we tie in different sports programs to help contribute? How can we work with, if a school's, pushing their boosters, how can we work with the boosters? If it's an AD that in the past, usually if you take over for an AD that ran the whole thing, is keep it rolling, or find a way, and it's just doing those simple things and just being able to really communicate, I think, is huge. And again, plug and snap, as we can do all those things. I love the fact that we just listen to the pain points, of the athletic directors and find ways to come up with solutions. And I think that's what you do as an athletic director too, when you're fundraising and then selling that mission and, just being successful. That's how you do it.
Yeah. We talked about the communication, but we talked about that, and Ruston did a great job on that. And I'd love to get with Ruston sometime and just talk about that development fundraising further. But 80% of giving is based on emotion. And so how can we add value? So one of the questions, Jamy, that you asked in kind of our pre-meeting was, how do you ask for money? You add value. You tell your story. And what does that mean for that business or that person? You creating awareness for a business or a corporate sponsor, brand loyalty, reinforcing their brand, driving traffic, stimulating sales for them. Those are all the things that you want to kind of, get to when you're asked for that money. I remember the most nervous I've ever been is when I was at Eastside Catholic and I had to ask somebody for $1.1 million. I mean, I was like physically sweating going into the meeting. And when it all was said and done, when I thought about it, I was like, we have a great, responsibility and a great job being an athletic director that we get to go out and change kids' lives. And so when we can tell that story and we can tell, how athletics and activities have changed kids' lives, like there's not an easier sell in the world. So that would be my parting tip.
Yeah, I would say two things. Number one, going back to what Scott was talking about a second ago, there's a really unhealthy trend right now nationally where states are selling the rights of their digital to companies, and obviously they're getting a kickback for it. And they're telling their entire state, everybody in our state has to use this platform for your digital. If you're a school, that's fine. You can do what the state told you to do, but you do not have to use that platform. And you're losing money by not going with somebody like Bound or someone like that who can take that digital content and keep it in-house and make sure that you're getting the kickback and you're getting the fundraising off that and not your state organization. Yeah. So I would encourage any athletic director who is being told that to investigate what they really can do and keep that money in-house. The other thing I would say, when I was running schools, I know nothing about IT, literally nothing. So, if someone were to come to me and say, hey, can you help us figure out our IT problems? My immediate response would be, let's find somebody who can help us with that. Most athletic directors are not by nature fundraisers. They're typically former coaches who did a good job leading and got promoted into a role. So if you're an athletic director and you're watching this and you're going, I'm not a fundraiser by nature, that's okay. There's people out there, like me, like Scott, who can come alongside and teach you how to fundraise. And most people would say, well, we can't afford a consultant to come do that. I would argue you can't afford a consultant to not do that, because every day that you're not out there actively raising money, you're losing money.
It's very similar when someone says, I don't have time to schedule my day, or I don't have time to do a to-do list, or whatever you want to say. Well, you don't have time not to do that. It'll save you so much more on the back end, or it'll make you more effective, more efficient. Guys, we really appreciate your insights today. For those who are listening, whether you watch this live on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, or whether you're listening to this on the Success is a Choice podcast network at a later time, if you want to reach out to any of the Scott, Ruston, or Tyler, please check out the show notes. We have their contact information in there as well, so you can reach out to them about their products or services, or just tips, further advice, further conversation with them. Thanks so much for everybody joining us today on the show. We appreciate it. Until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?